Let's talk about the latest installment in the Insidious franchise, Insidious 5, The Red Door. Josh Lambert heads east to drop his son Dalton off at school. However, Dalton's college dream soon becomes a living nightmare when the repressed demons of his past suddenly return to haunt them both. So Insidious, The Red Door takes place 9 years after the events of Insidious 2. So this trilogy, this would be a trilogy. So Insidious 1 and 2 are a continuation of the story, and then The Red Door would be like the final part to that trilogy, and then 4 and 5 are unrelated, and they're both, well, I don't want to say too much. Anyway, there's videos if you want to look up the order in which to watch these movies, but they are not chronological, except for 1, 2, and The Red Door. Now, with each of the Insidious movies that come out, the producers and the writers and the directors kind of get moved around, but it's pretty much the same group of people that we can kind of expect to be working on the movie in some capacity. So in this one, James Wan was still a producer and a screenwriter. Lee Winnell and Oren Peli were also producers on this one too. Now, what was mostly different about this movie, The Red Door, is that Patrick Wilson, this was his directorial debut. He decided to take on the role of director in this movie. Of course, he plays Josh Lambert in the Insidious movies. And so not only did he star in this as a lead, he also was the director for it, which was interesting. And, you know, with a directorial debut and being a sequel to something, I feel like that's a really big challenge, and he took a lot on in order to do this movie, and I think some people were really nervous, including myself, with that. I was still excited because it's cool when actors get to branch out and become directors, but it doesn't always translate well, right? It doesn't always, but I feel like with this situation, because he was in it for so long and was like a part of the franchise for a while, and like, I feel like he got it. I feel like he knew what the characters would do, and obviously he wasn't a writer on it, so he didn't like make a lot of decisions as far as that goes, but he, I think, understood the vision for the story and where the family would want to go. I think he actually might have had some creative control in what happened to the family and what the evolution for the story was, because he has sons himself, so that are kind of, you know, getting close to college age, so he could kind of relate to the situation that was portrayed in the movie. Now, I will say this is probably going to be the end of the Lambert story. In fact, I think it is definitely the end of the Lambert story, so I don't think we'll see the family return. But I don't think it's going to be the end of the Insidious franchise. Now, there is a post-credits scene to this movie that I did not stick around for and watch because I didn't know it was in there. And I have a baby to get home to, so I didn't stick around. I wish I would have. I have heard what it is now, so with that, I definitely don't think this is the end of Insidious, which I have mixed feelings about. You guys know I feel like we're kind of in this hamster wheel of entertainment where we're recycling a lot of old content that we've just seen over the past 20-30 years, and we're not getting a ton of new stuff. Especially now, obviously, with the writer's strike and everything, I feel like a lot of projects are up in the air, and it's gonna impact us probably for a couple of years in what kind of things we're watching. One interesting fact that I learned is that there are rumors that there will be an Insidious and Sinister crossover. I'm not sure how they would go about that. Obviously, Bagul is, you know, like a demon, so I don't know if they would just make him the main demon in Insidious or just part of it, or how those worlds would connect. I mean, it does kind of make sense with the plot of Insidious and how the demons are just looking for a host, really, to harm other people in reality. So that kind of plays into what Bagul does, right? Kind of possessing children a little bit to harm their families. I don't know. Now let's just talk about The Red Door as a movie in itself and like get to the actual review and my thoughts on it. So initially was not excited. I had no expectations at all going into this. I like the Insidious movies. I think they're very effective PG-13 horror movies. With that, I did kind of see this one being a little bit of a cash grab, but also an opportunity, I think, for Patrick Wilson. So I didn't really know what to expect, but I knew I wasn't excited. Like, I like the Insidious movies, but I'm just tired of the same old content. I'll watch them. You know, I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because I will pay money to go see them. So obviously they're gonna be successful if people just keep putting money into it and like spending money watching it, but I wasn't excited about it. I do like the originals. I think the strongest are the first two, so I liked that this was a continuation of the strongest story, in my opinion, of the Insidious franchise, so that was good to see, and I feel like we needed a little conclusion, a little bit of a better conclusion maybe to the Lambert family story. Also, something that's interesting is this movie will be streaming on Netflix on November 4th, which is a lot later than what we've been seeing movies being posted to streaming. I feel like in 2 weeks we'll turn around and it'll be on Peacock or something, and this one's not going to be like that. So if you do want to watch it like soon, you're gonna have to see it in theaters unless you want to wait until November. Okay, like usual with my review, we're gonna start with the positives, we'll then end with the negatives and just do overall thoughts. So things I liked. Now, you're gonna be surprised when I say this, but I take back everything I said about hating jump scares. The jump scares in this movie, I just feel like the Insidious franchise knows how to do a jump scare. No matter if you see it coming or not, most of the time you're blindsided by it, but if you see it coming, you're still gonna jump. Like, I feel like the franchise is just so effective at building that tension to where you're gonna jump, and they have follow through. So I feel like they have very effective jump scares, and I think they're famous for a reason. Now, I don't know if I am just more sensitive now. I don't know what's changed in me with horror movies. I do feel I'm more sensitive, and I scare easier than I used to, which is very bizarre. So my reviews are going to be skewed for a lot of movies this year. I hope I kind of go back to normal and like be a little desensitized, but I'm enjoying it. You know what? This is what horror is about. I want to be scared sometimes, and I'm living for it. But I don't know if it's because of that, or the jump scares are just so good, but I literally had a open cup of water, and there was a scene that I was not expecting to be a jump scare, so I went to take a sip of my water, and tell me why I spilled my cup of water. I was by myself in this theater too, so it was just really funny. I was laughing at myself. Luckily I had napkins and things because it was a place where you can order food and things, which is why I had an open water cup. I spilled it. That's never happened to me in a movie. I've never jumped so bad. It's like one of those popcorn scenes where you see people jump with popcorn. If I had popcorn, I would have done that. But I happen to have open water, which was worse. So I would have preferred the popcorn, to be honest. Out of all of the jump scares in this movie, there was only one that I didn't like because the follow through was one of the fake outs where it wasn't anything scary. It was just there to startle you. Everything else, oh my God. Like, it still lives up to the jump scares that we've seen in previous Insidious movies. Like, they're that level to me of jump scares, but are genuinely scary. Like, again, the follow through is really what I judge a jump scare on. If they're just trying to startle us and get our heart rate up, not a fan of that. But if it's like genuinely scary and the character themselves is jumping as well with us, that makes sense. I like that. So I take back what I've said in the past about jump scares and not liking them as much, because this movie was so good and wouldn't have been the same without the jump scares. And I feel like they knew the balance when to jump scare you and when to just scare you with the horror visuals. I feel like there was a good balance of that. And the horror in this was genuinely so good. Insidious is just really effective. I mean, PG-13 horror to me is scarier than R-rated horror in the fact that they have to use like paranormal, supernatural, and that's my favorite kind of horror. Not so much the blood and guts and gore. So the fact that they can get away with so much horror in a PG-13 movie because it's not gory, I think it was really good. Another thing I love about Insidious movies that will be effective for me in every single one, no matter how good or bad the movie is the further. I'll never get over the further. I feel like conceptually and visually and the way it sounds in the further will always work for me. It's always gonna be a hit. And I was really happy to see it on the big screen again because it really immerses you in it, and I definitely think this deserves a theater experience. If you're a fan of jump scares or, you know, James Wan style movies or Insidious, obviously, it's definitely worth the theater because of the jump scares and the sounds and the further and all of that. I feel like they could have pushed it a little bit more and shown more of the further. I wanted more. But I would take a whole movie set in the further, but that's just me. There's a scene in this that reminded me of The Sixth Sense in a really good way. It almost felt like an homage, and I don't know if it was intentional on anyone's part that worked on this movie, but it felt very Sixth Sense. But it was like a combination of a couple Sixth Sense scenes. And it's kind of like the bathroom scene, if you've seen this movie, or if you're going to see this movie, the bathroom situation. Just keep an eye out for that, because that reminded me of M. Night Shyamalan's Sixth Sense. Now, I think a lot of people are going to take issue with the drama in this movie. It's a little bit more family drama. There's always like some kind of family backstory going on in the Insidious movies. I mean, we're following the family. This one has a little bit more drama because there's tension and the family's kind of dispersed and they're not really together, and there's tension between him and his son, specifically Dalton. The other son isn't really in this that much. He's not the best actor, so I don't know, I don't want to be mean, but I feel like they limited his role a little bit because they wanted the original actors to be in this. Which, side note, I really liked. I liked that they had them come back, like all the original cast, including the children from the first two movies, come back to reprise their roles in this one. I think that was a really smart choice. Rose Byrne returned as well. I really liked that. I liked seeing them be, you know, their characters again, and it felt like a good next chapter for the family to have the actors return and everything. Now, the reason why all the personal stuff in the beginning of this movie and like the first hour of this movie is incredible. I really liked it. I was very entertained the whole time. But the reason why it works for me and why I think it should work for other people is because we already have a stake in this family. Like, we already know these characters, so we should be interested in what's continuing on in their lives. Obviously, if you're just in it for the horror, then you're not going to really care about the family drama, but if you're watching an Insidious movie, I feel like there's always a backstory there. There's always something else going on to give context, you know? So there is more to it this time around, and I think some people will say that this movie is a little bit on the slower side because of that. So it could be a negative for some. For me, I liked it. I liked the continuation of the family because, again, we already care about them, so we're not just seeing a father dropping his son off and there's tension and we don't know anything that's happening or what the backstory is. We know, like, they give us context in the beginning and we know, like, their history, so I feel like it's more interesting. Okay, let's talk about the things I didn't like. So not a perfect movie by any means. I don't think any of the Insidious movies are. I do think like I said, the first two are really strong. I don't know if this one's as strong as those ones. Although the jump scares really worked for me. I don't know, again, what it was. These jump scares, man. Anyway, but negatives, a lot of it was predictable and cliche, like a typical kind of movie in this, done in this style. I don't know. It's like a James Wan movie. To me, they all have something really cliche about them, like all of them. One of the things is something I talked about semi-recently in another review, I forgot which one it was, but calling his little brother, even though we already know that's his little brother. Like, we don't need the context as an audience because we know this family already, so I don't know who would say, you know, I got you, little brother, or whatever the sentence was that he used that in, you know, when they're on the phone. You don't need to say little brother. Like, I don't think people would really say that. And we don't need that, especially in this movie. So that's just one little nitpicky thing I didn't like. Something else I didn't like is Chris as a character. Now, every Insidious movie has like a comedic relief character, and that's fine. But this one was pushed to the extreme, I feel, and she was in it a lot. And I'll give a couple examples of like why I found her to be slightly annoying is because when they were like sharing weird things about themselves and Dalton is like, yeah, I was in a coma. I don't remember like a whole year, but they told me it was meningitis. And she was telling her story about how her parents passed away when she was 10. And she's like, I really could have used some of that meningitis, so I don't have to remember my childhood. Meningitis. It's just a lot of like internet talk, you know, that sure, people do that in real life, but it's just really cringy. Another example is when she comes into the room, she's like, I've been browsing the interwebs. Can we not say interwebs? Those are the two examples that made me cringe the most, but there are so many more like language things like that she was just using internet talk a lot, and wasn't a huge fan. Another thing that's kind of iffy is a lot of it feels very similar to things that they've already done in the past. Like, obviously, Josh and Dalton have already been in the Further together as father and son, and they have that link, so like it makes sense that they're going to continue that. But it does feel similar to the other Insidious movies. Like, there wasn't a ton of new stuff other than there's like different tension in the family versus before it was like a different kind of storyline. But the horror is pretty much the same. They kind of revisit similar places. And again, that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who's watching it. Like if you just want something that feels familiar to the previous Insidious movies because they got it right the first time, then you're going to like it. If you wanted something a little bit fresh and new, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much. And then the last thing I really didn't like that much is the ending. I feel like it just wasn't as strong as like the first hour of this movie with the horror. I really wanted them to push it a lot more. And then the conclusion wasn't as satisfying as I wanted it to be. It's not too bad. I liked it. You know, I liked the movie as a whole, but I do feel like the ending was a little bit on the weaker side, and I wish they kind of rewrote it a little bit and added some extra scary stuff in there. I feel like all the horror was really packed in like the beginning and the middle and wasn't really that strong in the end. Overall, I was very, very shocked at how scary this movie was to me. And it made me start to reevaluate like my relationship with horror and how it feels different now. So that might just be my experience and I might genuinely be more sensitive now. I don't know. I could not tell you. So take that with a grain of salt maybe. I don't know. But it worked. It worked for me and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the heck out of this movie in the theater and watching it by myself and jumping and having a good time. Like it's been so long since I jumped like that in the theater like 5 times. So it worked for me, it was effective, and I was very surprised at how much I liked this and the story because I had no expectations. If anything, I had very low expectations because I thought it was a cash grab. I thought it was gonna be like the same old thing. And you know, it was very similar. But it was a nice conclusion, I think, to continue the Lambert story. So overall, good experience. Even though I wasn't initially excited for it, I had really a fun time. And I feel like that's what horror is truly about, is having fun and getting scared. And this kind of reawoken my love for the Insidious franchise. And I kind of want to go back and rewatch all of them to like enjoy it again. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I do feel like a lot of people are going to give this kind of a more negative review because it's not as strong as the first two, but I don't know, I think it's fun. So I highly recommend the theater experience for this. Any kind of James Wan I feel like is just more effective in the theater than watching at home, unless you have like a really good setup with surround sound audio for the jump scares. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on The Red Door, if you liked it or not. How'd you feel about Patrick Wilson's directing? Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.